have pressed pause for the past 2 weeks as we were looking at a series called Generous. It was all about generosity, and now we have jumped back into our summer series, which is Heroes of the Faith. And we've been looking at different men and women of the Scriptures that were great exemplars of faith, and been looking into their stories and trying to help you and I how we can be heroes of the faith. And so today, as we're talking about heroes and stuff, I thought that it was only fitting to kind of start off with a superhero kind of story of sorts, right? So Batman and Robin, they were camping. Okay, Batman and Robin were camping, and they cooked their meal, they pitched their tent, and they started to fall asleep that night. Well, in the middle of the night, they woke up, and Batman woke up Robin, and he's like, "Hey, Robin, what do you see?" And Robin says, "Holy cannoli, Batman, there's lots of stars out there." And so Batman's like, "Well, what does that tell you, Robin?" And Robin says, "Well, astronomically, it tells me that there's millions and millions of stars and potentially billions of galaxies. Chronologically, I can tell it's 3:15 in the morning, and so we should probably be sleeping. Theologically, it tells me that God is very big, and we are so small and honestly insignificant. Meteorologically," that's a big word, it helps me deduce that, we're going to have a beautiful day tomorrow." And so he says, "Well, Batman, what does that tell you?" And Batman says, "Well, dummy, somebody stole our tent." And I want to start off with that funny hook, that superhero story, because you can be a superhero but not be super smart. And today we're going to be studying a superhero of sorts in the Old Testament, a superhero that honestly at times was not very smart. It's in the book of Judges, chapter 14, so if you've got your Bibles, you can open up there. Judges chapter 14, we're going to look at the superhero of the Old Testament known as Samson. And if you've ever been, in church at any time at all, you've probably heard about Samson and some of his wild escapades that he got in. His story is found in 4 different chapters, actually, in the book of Judges. Judges 13, 14, 15, and 16. Now, we're not going to go through all of those today. We're only going through one chapter. But a full one-fifth of the book of Judges is devoted to Samson. He's an incredibly important character. And he's a very complicated person, too, though. He was somebody that really puzzles us. He's honestly a walking enigma. He is empowered by the Spirit of God, but he yields to the appetites of the flesh. He was strong before men, but he was very weak before women. He could conquer all the enemies around him, right? But he could not conquer his biggest enemy, which was the enemy inside of him. He was a guy that fought the Lord's battles, but he did that by day, but he disobeyed the Lord's commandments by night. This is who Samson was. In the book of James in the New Testament, he talks about how we should not be double-minded people. That is very much the description of Samson. He was a double-minded man, unstable in all of his ways, to quote James. But interestingly enough, just a little more about him, is that his name actually means sunny. S-U-N-N-Y, like sunny and bright. He was the bright one. And it's ironic because he actually dies not being able to see the sun. He's blinded by his appetites and whatnot. He ends up actually giving his life, laying his life down, and he's blind here. Something else you should know about him is that as we look here in this text, he's also in another text. We've actually looked in this series at the book of Hebrews at times, Hebrews 11, and he's actually found in that chapter as well. He's named in a sentence among many others as a person of faith in the Old Testament. But I do want to start off to say that although he might be a man of faith, he was not a faithful man. He's not. And we're going to see that some in our story today. He was not faithful to his parents. He was not faithful to his vows. He was not faithful to his God. Yet God used him in all of his struggles to do some pretty wild things. And we'll see some of that today. So again, we don't have time to look at all the chapters, the whole 4 chapters in Judges, but we're going to look at chapter 14. And so that's some background. Here's the setting for where we're at here in this text. So he's going to be going against these people called the Philistines. And again, you might have heard of these people before. They occupied the land at this time. They were people from Greece who, after a failed attempt to take over the Egyptians in 1200 BC, they moved into right on the coast of Israel. And so for 100-something years, they were just the perpetual enemies of the Israelites, constantly at odds with each other. And so God raises up these judges to take care of these people. That's what the book of Judges is all about, is to push these people out of the land that God has given to his children. And the principal judge that he tries to use is Samson. But Samson is unsuccessful. And we're going to kind of see why it is that he's unsuccessful today. I want to show you in this sermon how he crashes and burns. This is the title of our message, really, is Crash and Burn. We're going to look here at 5 downward steps that Samson takes. And my prayer is that God helps us to not take the same downward steps, right? To not fall into these same things, but to be cautious so that we can grow into the men and women of faith that God is calling us to be. And so the first thing I want to look at is how he disrespected his parents. That's the first downward step that Samson takes. He disrespects his parents. So if you've got your Bibles open to Judges 14, we're going to jump into verse 1. It says, Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as a wife. His father and mother replied, Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, Get her for me. She's the right one for me. And we'll stop there. Now, you might see this and you might question some things. So, this is probably not the way to speak to your parents, right? That's what we would take away from this. Now, he does have a godly heritage. If you don't know a little bit of background about him, God speaks to his parents in a divine revelation of a way and says like, hey, your son is coming. And when he was born, they raised him to honor God. His parents dedicated him at a very young age by using this vow known as the vow of the Nazarite. And it's an Old Testament book. In the Old Testament book of Numbers, chapter 6, there's a special vow of holiness known as the vow of the Nazarite. And so he is a man of God. He's literally been dedicated to God his entire life. And yet he comes and he speaks to his parents in this way. As soon as Samson's born, at the very end of chapter 13, it says that the Lord blessed him and the Spirit of the Lord began to move upon him. So that's where it begins. But if you turn the page to chapter 14, this is how it starts off. The Lord blesses him, the Lord is over him, but as soon as he gets out from underneath his parents' wing, he speaks in this way. He goes to the wrong place and to the wrong people. It's his first public acts as a man of God, right? And it says that he goes down to Timnah. If you notice that language, he goes down. Now, Timnah is Philistine country. That's why he sees this Philistine woman. And so he's going down here. And this is like the author's writing both geographically and topographically like he is going down, right? But you can also read this as spiritually. He is going down, right? His life is going south. And of course, when you start to hang out in the wrong places, you'll probably pick up some wrong people. And so as he's going into the Philistines' country, he sees this woman and he looks at her and he finds her beautiful. This Philistine chick is everything that he could want, right? He sees her and he says, I got to have her as my wife. He hadn't even spoken to this girl yet. He just sees her and he likes what he sees. And according to the custom of the day, he goes to his father and mother and says, hey, get her for me as a wife. And so it's really not love at first sight. It's lust at first sight. He sees what he wants and he says, go get that for me. And I'm speaking that way because that's the way he's speaking of her. It's not a human before him, really. It's just a thing that he wants. And so he's speaking in this way to her. And really, he's living with his eyeballs. And we have taught, I'm just going to speak a little bit to our culture. In our culture today, we're honestly teaching our boys to think of women the same way. We're teaching them this. Whether it's by beautiful models in the magazines and they display this specific product, and I say magazines, that's kind of dated. The internet, right? As they're watching TV, videos and stuff, these are the ads that are popping up. And so they see this product, but it ain't a product that they're selling. It's the girl that's there before them. Maybe it's mannequins in the store that how in the world are any ladies going to fit into the clothes that are on the mannequin, right? Like we're telling them this is an unrealistic vision. The computer generated perfect women that are curated in our films and videos, that's all Photoshop and stuff. We're teaching our young men to look for women that don't exist. And then we're teaching our young women that they're not enough, that they are not beautiful as God has created them to be. And that's what we are doing. But that's what they were doing here as well. He sees her with his eyes and he says, I want that. And I've chatted with some young men as my time at Baylor and as well as just even around here at times. I've chatted with some young men and I've asked them the question, hey, what is it that you want in a wife? You know, what is it that you're looking for in a future spouse? And they're like, you know, Kody, not too much. Not too much. You know, just they have to have the IQ of Albert Einstein. They have to look like a supermodel and then also be an Olympic athlete. And like that's the idea that they have. They won't say it in those terms, but it's like it's really unrealistic. And so I'll follow that up with, well, why in the world would she want to be with you? Like that's the kind of conversations that I'm having, right? Samson's parents thought, why is it that you want to go and marry one of these girls? Like, I mean, can't you just find a good Jewish girl, one of our people here? And you might ask, like, why in the world would their parents say that? Like, are they just that out of tune? Are they that closed-minded? Like, why would they say those things? They just don't understand. Samson's like, but Mom, it's love. And like, that's what they're talking about, right? And why is it that they ask this question? It's not that his parents are closed-minded. It's that they knew their Bible. Deuteronomy 7 and Exodus 34, where God says, when you go into the land that I'm bringing you into, do not intermarry with these people of the land. Because God has told them, hey, if you give your daughters over to these men, or if you let your men take on their daughters, they will turn you away from me. God has told them this, and his parents know this. And so they're like, why can't you just find a girl among our people? Like, this is what God has called us to. Don't marry an unbeliever because the unbeliever will steer you away from God. That's what they're saying to him. But you can hear his voice in his reply. He's like, she pleases me, though. She pleases, go get her. Like I could just imagine him speaking to them, like so sassy. Like, no, get her for me. Like, I want that. And like he's speaking down to them, he disrespects his parents. It says in Proverbs 30:11 that there is a generation that curses their parents and does not bless their mothers, or curses their fathers and does not bless their mothers. Samson was of this generation. He was disobedient towards his parents. But notice where it continues here. Look at verse 4 with me. This is where it picks up. It's kind of a footnote of sorts in your Bible. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. For at that time, they were ruling over Israel. Now, I want to explain this because it might have confused you hearing that as it did me when I first read it. Because it's like, okay, he's disrespecting his parents and he's trying to go with this foreign woman that God has told them not to intermarry. But now it's saying that the Lord was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines. Like, is God justifying this? Like, is this God's doing here? So I want to explain some of this. It doesn't mean that you can just live however you want and God is just going to say, pat you on the butt and say, good job. Like that's not what God is saying here. He's not just going to cover you in that way. It does mean that when you don't allow God to rule over you, God may overrule you. When you don't allow God to rule over you, he will overrule you. God wanted to use Samson in a mighty way. Samson was not being obedient, but God's just going to overrule this situation and turn it for his good. And so this is what he does. God overrules him. God will accomplish his purposes in and through our lives, despite us, in spite of us. Like, God does what it is that he needs to do. He disrespected his parents. That's the first step that Samson takes as he's going downward. The second one is that he disregarded his God. So he disrespected his parents. And secondly, he takes a further step down. He disregarded his God. Pick up with me in Judges 14, verse 5. Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father or mother what he had done. Then he went down and he talked with the woman. Like, this is the first time that we're seeing that he's actually talking to this girl that he saw with his eyes. So he talks to her and he liked her. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and he ate as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. And we'll stop there for just a minute. He's traveling down to Timnah, right? He's on his way down there, and he's with his mom and dad, and evidently he just leaves them. He kind of skirts off on his own direction, and he goes through this vineyard. And without his parents there, he goes through this vineyard, and he's attacked by this lion. And you know the story there. He rips it apart, right? The question that I had as I was reading this, though, because knowing that he's been set apart as a Nazirite, a vow that there's 3 different things that I'm about to show you that Nazirites can't do. He's walking through a vineyard, for one, and then there's this carcass where he's scooping out the honey for 2, and it's like, that's two strikes out of 3. It doesn't make sense. If you didn't know what a Nazirite vow is, this is it. I kind of simplified it in a little picture here. Just to refresh our memory, these are the 3 things that involve being a Nazirite. You don't cut your hair. You got to let it grow. They were the OG hippies. They were the original hippies. They just let it grow. But really, what it was a sign of humility. Like, that's what it was. They did not cut their hair. A Nazirite also was not allowed to touch a corpse because it would make them become defiled, unclean. And this is a big commitment because it even involves family. Like, if mom and dad die, you're not to be at the funeral. You can't touch the body. Like, this was a large commitment for someone. You can't touch a corpse. And a Nazirite also could not drink intoxicating drinks, but it goes even further from that. So you can't have wine, but you also can't even eat grapes or raisins or anything that comes from the vine. That is what a Nazirite has signed on for when they commit their lives, submit their lives to God for the entirety of it. Where is it that he's walking? Through a vineyard. What is it that he scoops the honey out of? The carcass of a lion. That's 2 out of 3. Like, what is my man doing? He's just going off. And so it's interesting that he's going through this vineyard. I mean, it's literally a tempting place. I mean, if a grape's just dropped on the ground and my man's hungry, like he just picks one up and eats it, he's defiled. Like, what? That's a tempting place to be. It might not be a big deal to you and to me, but for a Nazirite, it would be. And some Christians, they'll ask the question, like, how far can I go and still be a Christian? What all sins can I do and still be a Christian? And that's a common question, but believe it or not, a lot of people will ask that question, and it's the wrong question to ask. It's just not one that you should even be asking at all. It's like, how far can I get to the edge without falling in? Some believers will literally sail their ships so close to the lake of fire that their sails will get singed and burned. And it's like, that's not how God wants you to live. And Samson was living that way. And if I can encourage us, that's not how God wants you to live. Don't be asking those questions. That's the wrong line of questioning. But Samson was doing it here. According to verse 9, he's on his way back. He takes some honey out of the corpse of the lion. And again, that vow that he has taken, he's not supposed to touch anything that's dead. It's the corpse, it literally defiles you. He's a Nazirite. He should not be doing this. He is reaching in and grabbing this honey, and he's just enjoying it for himself. And it's like, you're just becoming defiled, brother. Like, he's already relationally defiled. He's disrespecting his parents. He's already morally defiled because all he's thinking about is, what he sees and what he wants, right? He's trying to undress her with his eyes. He's looking at this Philistine woman that way. He's ceremonially defiled now at this point. He's eating out of a carcass of a lion. And all of that to say, he's a Nazirite, but he's not taking his vow seriously. He's not. And that's because it's just not important to him. He has defiled his God. I meet people all around who will say, things like, I used to go to church here. I remember I used to go to Scottsville Baptist Church for a long time, or I was baptized here. I was dedicated here as a child. And sometimes I'll say, like, man, that's so wonderful. How is that going? Are you going to church anywhere? Oh, no. I kind of fell out of that for a long time. I haven't been back in. And I'll go occasionally, maybe Christmas, maybe Easter or whatnot. And, we don't take things seriously. He didn't take things seriously here. This vow that he gave his life to God, it just wasn't important to him. And really, that's what a lot of us will do at times. My relationship with God really isn't that important to me. I'll show up when, the occasion calls for it, Easter and Christmas. But outside of that, it's just, I'm busy. I've got too much to do, right? We at times can do the same thing. Jesus said, and I mean, these are harsh words, but he said these, many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have I not prophesied in your name? Have I not cast out demons in your name? Have I not done all these wonderful things in your name? And he says, I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness. We just don't take it serious. We come when it's convenient for us. And the problem with Samson is he did not take his vow seriously. He defiled his God. It just wasn't that important to him. He disrespected his parents. He defiled his God. And my question for you, like I would ask even Samson, is, are you devoted? Are you actually all in? Because he wasn't, really. And so would we be challenged to be all in for him? Samson wasn't. He disregarded his God. The third step down that he takes is he distanced his friends. He distanced his friends. He pushed them away. We're going to look at Judges 14, verses 10 and 11, just 2 verses. And I want to ask you guys to note, I want you to notice what's there and what isn't there in these 2 verses with us. Look, this is Judges 14, 10 and 11. Now his father went down to see the woman. Now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson held a feast, as was customary for young men. When the people saw him, he chose 30 men to be his companions. Now I want you to notice what's there, and I want you to notice what's not there. So the thing that I've highlighted here, you might say there was a feast, right? And the reason I highlight the word feast is because the Hebrew word for feast here is mishta. And mishta is not just any feast, but it's a drinking feast. That is what it is. It's a rager of sorts. It is a beer bash. It is a bachelor party. That's what he's having. He's having a drinking party. And again, I just want to call to your recollection, what is it that he signed on for as a Nazirite? Not to have any intoxicating drink. You can only imagine there's going to be intoxicating drink here. Again, another situation that he's just giving himself into, he's walking into. And yes, other men, this is customary at the time, it says. And even today, it's customary for bachelor parties to happen like that, but not for the Nazirite men, not like this. This isn't the kind of party that they're called to have. And so he's throwing this drinking party. There's intoxicating drinks, of course. And then there's also his dad is there. His father went down with him. And I noticed that because it's there in the text. Now, why is it that he's there? I'm really unsure why, really. One commentator said that perhaps his father was there to reach out to his son one last time, sort of like a one last attempt to say, hey, I don't condone this marriage. Like, are you sure you want to go through with this? And so maybe daddy was there for that reason. Please don't go through with this. But what I'd like to say, what I want you to see is what's not there. So those things are there, but what's not there? At the end, it says that they had to choose 30 men to be his companions. They had to choose them. Where's his friends at? Why is it that he doesn't have his own, party of men that are, friends with him? They had to choose these randos off the street. These random Philistine people to come and be his guys at the wedding party. Where is his friends? Why didn't he bring them? In Jewish weddings, there was normally a group called the Friends of the Bridegroom. Jesus himself even mentions this in Matthew 9. You can go back and read it. The Friends of the Bridegroom. This is normal. And so what it does is it suggests to me is that there's 3 options here, really, is that he either did not tell them that he was having a wedding, maybe he just didn't have friends altogether, or perhaps they didn't want to be there because they didn't condone it, what was happening. There's 3 options there. I don't know which one it is or why, but one thing that we know for certain about Samson as you look at his story in chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 of Judges is that this guy is a loner. He is never around friends. You will never see an army marching with him. He never has a bunch of friends with him there marching as his soldiers. He is never strategizing with different leaders. He's never surrounded by good friends. He is always alone. He always acts alone, and that's not good. It's not healthy at all to make your decisions on your own. Proverbs 18:1 says this, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desires. He rages against all wise judgment. There's another proverb that says there's wisdom in the counsel of many, We should have other people feeding into our lives and telling us, some good, wise counsel, some direction. Samson didn't have that. Samson literally raged against all wise wisdom. His parents, his God, his vows, and now he's acting alone. Like he's a loner. And a person who does that is easy pickings for the enemy. The enemy will come in and twist your life all up. We need to have good friends. We need to have some autocorrect, some help in our lives. I think of it like when you're writing a paper or like you're texting, right? Many of you probably have had this instance where you're texting somebody and it autocorrects and you're like, no, I knew what I was spelling. Why is it that you autocorrected that? And so you have to send it a follow-up text and you're like, I didn't mean to say that. I don't know why it changed, right? Y'all probably, maybe you've had that. Or perhaps you think of it this way. If you're writing a Word document and you're like myself, I like to pride myself that I can spell some words. But sometimes I need that red line to come underneath it and it say, oh wait, stop. Did you actually mean to say this? And here's 3 options for you. And it gives like 3 different options of what you could have said. And you're like, oh yes, thank you. And you click the right one. Have y'all ever done that before? Yeah, I think we all understand that. Wouldn't it be cool if we had autocorrect in our own lives, like spell check in our own lives, right? Like you're going about and it's like, hey, wait, pause. I don't think that's the best idea. Like, here's 3 other options for you. And it's like, wouldn't that be nice? Like, if we had that in our own lives, I want to tell you that you do. You can. It's called friends. It's called wise friends. Good, godly friends. Real friends that know you. Know exactly how it is that you think. They're your spell check. They are your people that can come in and say, hey, brother, hey, sister, I don't think that that's God's best for you. And I do this out of love. I come to you in this way, and I want to give you, hey, here's 3 other options. Like, this is where you could go right. But if you go this direction, I don't think that you're saying what you're really wanting to say. And that's what friends are. Samson disrespected his parents. He probably had friends, and he distanced them. He disregarded his God. And let me give you the 4th step that he takes downward. He downplayed his failure. He downplayed his failure. Pick up with me in verse 12. He's now at this wedding feast. It says this, let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. They said, tell us the riddle. Let's hear it. He replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, they could not give him an answer. But on the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, hey, coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Like, can I just pause here for a second and say, you probably don't want these people at your wedding. Like, that's just, I don't know why they should be here. They shouldn't. Verse 16. Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, oh, you hate me. You hate me. Why don't you really love me? You've given my people this riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. I haven't even explained it to my father and mother, he replied, so why would I explain it to you? She cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She in turn then explained the riddle to her people. Verse 18. But before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? And Samson said to them, if you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle. This marriage is just not off to a good start. I mean, he's got his wife crying for their honeymoon, right? He's got 30 guys that want to kill his wife and his father-in-law, and then the cherry on top, he called his wife a cow. I mean, it's not starting off good. There's not good things happening here. The wedding feast has lasted for 7 days. This is customary. This is a customary thing within their culture. And during these 7 days, they always have a battle of the wits of sorts. And so they'll present these riddles or different word challenges. And so this is what they're doing here. It's a battle of the wits, right? And what I want you to notice, though, is what is the subject of his riddle. It's the carcass of the lion. The subject of his riddle is the honey that he ate out of the lion. In other words, Samson has constructed his riddle based on the experience of his own sin. He's making light of it. It's just a joke. And he's literally constructing this from the experience of his own sin. I mean, it's bad enough that he disobeyed God, but now he takes this, like, it's this special kind of callousness of sorts to, like, take this and then make a joke about it. He's disobeying him, right? And the people are like, hey, we can't figure this out. Hey, coax your wife. And so she tells him, he tells the riddle to him. The feast is coming to an end. This is another step downward for Samson. He's disrespected his parents. He's disregarded his God. He's distanced his friends, and he's downplaying his failure. He's making a joke, a mockery of his sin. It's not that big a deal. And so he just makes light of it. The fifth and final step he takes is he decimated his enemies. He decimates his enemies. He truly does. Look with me at verse 19. Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And if you were just to read that, you'd be like, hey, man, this is great stuff. I'm glad the Spirit's still working with this crazy guy. But watch how it continues. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, and stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those who explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home. Burning with anger. I want you to recognize this. Samson is a man with a cold heart and a hot head, a hot temper. To pay his debt, he literally went to a city that's 23 miles away and kills 30 people, strips them naked of their clothes, takes their Armani suits, and brings them back to his friends. It's like, hey, here, debt paid. Like, what? This guy is crazy. He has a bit of an anger problem, don't you think? Like, I mean, that's wild. He goes nuclear on these people. And again, in order to get 30 pairs of garments off of 30 dead bodies, what do you have to do? Touch the corpse. Again, further defiling himself as a Nazirite. We don't have time to look at it, but there's in the next chapter, there's actually this other occasion where he gets so angry. His anger produces, again, this action that's just obscene. He takes 30 foxes, ties their tails together, lights them on fire, which is animal abuse, and he sends them off into the field of the Philistines to destroy all of their crop. And so that's what they do. He does. It's like, what in the world? This guy has an anger issue. He kills 30 people, doesn't even go home to consummate his marriage, and he goes to his parents' house, and look how the chapter ends. And Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. What? While he's away, his wife gets with the best man. I mean, it's literally like a Jerry Springer show. Like, as you're watching this, it's crazy how this goes down. This is a bad choice after bad choice after bad choice. And we have witnessed this slow downward movement of Samson, these 5 steps down. But I believe that we can learn from his bad choices and how we can be better men and women of faith. Superpowers don't make superheroes of faith. What really makes a superhero of faith is when a person lays their life down, submits to the Spirit of God in their daily life, and God uses them in supernatural ways. That's how superheroes are made. It's not superpowers. And so let me give you 3 quick takeaways, just real quick, that we can learn from Samson's crashing and burning. The first is take God seriously. Take him seriously. His parents made a vow, and they committed their son to the Lord, but he squandered it. He squandered it. If you want to know something interesting, never once will you find Samson ever praying in the book of Judges except one time. The only time that he does it is at the very end when he looks up to God and he says, let me give my life, let me avenge my enemies. And God gives him that power and he crushes himself underneath the pillars and everyone dies. It's the only time you will ever see him praying. And I know people who are like that. I know people who only in instances of tragedy or whatnot strikes that they go to God. They don't take God seriously 90% of the time. It's only that 10%. Will we take God seriously? Because Samson didn't. I think we can learn that. The second thing I think we can take away is that we need to choose our friends wisely. We need to choose them wisely. In the absence of Samson bringing good friends, 30 bad friends were put in their place. There's a vacuum of sorts. If you don't have good, wise, godly counsel, it will be filled with something else. And so would we have that? Somebody once said that if you want to soar with the eagles, you can't run with the turkeys. And I think that's such a good, wise statement, right? I mean, eventually you will become like the people that you're hanging out with. So will we choose our friends wisely? Thirdly, make your choices cautiously. Make them cautiously. One of the things that you discover while studying Samson's life is that he was an impulsive person. Quick decisions, right? I see her, I want her. Yeah, but no, I want her. Like he just makes it impulsively. He loses a bet, kills 30 people. Like just impulsive. He's all over the map. You never know what's coming. And again, superpowers don't make superheroes. What really makes a superhero is when a person is empowered by the Spirit of God in their daily life to reach the full potential that God has for them. That's what makes a superhero of the faith. And my prayer is that we would allow God's Spirit to empower you and I, that we might be the superheroes of the faith that He's calling us to be, the plans that He has for us, because only through His power can we accomplish those things, not on our own strength. Will we be superheroes like